Welcome to Earth Week 2021, brought to you with a collaboration between Central Hall Commons and the Piscataquis Democrats Education and Outreach Committee, who are committed to expanding knowledge about climate change and promoting discussion about what we can do about it. These events are integral to the mission also of Central Hall Commons, which is to nurture a welcoming, healthy, inclusive rural community culture by engaging people and organizations in connecting, celebrating, and learning together. Before we start, I would like to again recognize that we are on land occupied for millennia by the Wabanaki people and to honor the current tribes, Penobscot, Passamaquoddy, Micmac, and Maliseet, who believe they belong to the land rather than the land belonging to them. We're grateful for the use of this land and for their leadership and efforts to preserve and protect the air, land, and water, and to promote cultural healing. I'm Leslie Fernandes, president of Central Hall Commons, and also I'm a member of the Equity Subcommittee that was appointed by the governor to the Maine Climate Council to ensure equity in the implementation of the climate plan. And so I may address some of those issues in my comments today regarding the weatherization. I am going to be presenting today, and the presentation I'm going to do today is on strategy B. It's focused on the strategy of the Maine Won't Wait plan on modernizing Maine's buildings. And I'll just go over some of the context of this, and then we'll talk a little bit. Some of this has been covered in some of the other talks we've done this week. We had a really great talk last night about heat pumps, and it was a really great conversation. So I hope we'll have good conversation today. I'm first going to start by talking a little bit about the context of this. Of why this is a portion of the Maine Climate Plan and what it means in the context of Maine. And then I'm going to focus a little bit on, I'm going to list the strategies for all the focus of strategy B, because we aren't going to cover everything, and some has been covered and some we won't be covering. So I'm just going to go over that so everybody has an overview of that. And then I'm going to delve into the issues around weatherization, and I will actually do a little bit of show and tell about window dressers at the end. So, I mean, how can I not, right? The context of this is that 30% of CO2 emissions in the state are due to either residential or commercial buildings, which is second in contribution to CO2, second only as a group, second only to transportation. So this is an important topic for getting a handle on our CO2 emissions in the state. There are 550,000 existing homes in Maine, and of those, 56% of them are older than age. They were built before 1960. So we have an old housing stock. More than half of the privately owned homes and about 2/3 of rental units were built before 1960. So this brings up a lot of issues regarding weatherization and heating and the way heating is done. The other thing I wanted to bring to people's attention, which hasn't been talked about, I don't think, in other presentations this week, is the issue of energy burden. And I've been dealing a lot with, one of my many hats that I wear is I am a consultant for the Penquis Behavioral Health Home, which has really been fascinating work. Since I retired from my medical practice, my regular office practice, I've been doing some consulting for Penquis, and that behavioral health home serves low-income individuals with behavioral health or mental health issues who are all low income by definition. And we have meetings every couple of weeks with the team of case managers and a fabulous team, really, really remarkable team. And we hear about the situations that people present, the people and their families. And what is absolutely astonishing to me is the complexity of the lives of people who are low income. And one of the complexities is that the food burden is higher. That what that means is the amount of money that is spent by people for that segment of their living as a percentage of their total income. So the food burden is high. They pay a lot out of their total income for food, and their energy burden and their housing burden is enormous. The energy burden for low-income populations is much higher than the energy burden for non-low-income populations, and the rural low-income populations pay a much higher percentage of their income to meet their home energy needs. And that is about 9% of their income for heat versus 3% for non-low income. So 3 times what people who are not low income in terms of the percent of their total income. And in some cases, it can be up to 18%. 18%, that's a lot to spend on energy. The low-income households exist in an unfortunate paradox where energy efficiency upgrades are completely inaccessible to them because of the high upfront costs, and the low energy efficiency of their homes costs them more. And so there's this dilemma that we will talk a little bit about in my presentation about how is the state going to implement the plan in an equitable way to see that low-income individuals can benefit from heat pumps, for example. I mean, it's clear that people who have heat pumps would pay less for their energy, but they don't have the money to pay for heat pumps. And so this is a real dilemma in our state, and it's something I just wanted to be sure we talked about, or at least touched on during the conversation. The other, yes, Bill. Yeah.
Now, I wonder if there's a difference between people that own their homes and people that rent homes, and where the cost burden, splits. Is a person who owns a property renting it out going to invest in upgrading the home and the heating system? And can they qualify for some kind of incentive?
Yeah, that's really a good question, and it's complicated. But the answer to that is it affects both owners and renters. So low-income owners and low-income renters all have a higher energy burden because in either case, in one case, they don't have the money, the upfront money to maybe switch over to cheaper forms of energy. And if they're renters, they have either they have no incentive or no control. And the landlord is the one who has to make that decision. And so the reality is that in terms of the implementation of the strategy, one of the things that we have to do is incentivize the different populations that we want to change their behaviors. And that means we have to incentivize owners of rental properties. The other issue that you didn't bring up, but some people pay for their own energy, they pay for their heat, and other people don't. I mean, some people, when they rent, their landlord pays for that, or they pay for the electric bill, but they don't pay for the heat. So for example, if you switch from a fossil fuel heating to electric, to an electricity-based heating like a heat pump, and your electric rates go up, your electric costs go up, and you're the renter who's paying your electric bill, but you're not paying your heating bill, there's a disincentive. All right, so there are a lot of, it's actually a fairly complicated question, but you're raising the right questions. And these are questions that the equity committee subcommittee is talking about very actively, is how do we incentivize all players to make change in the system as it is, to move from the status quo. That's the key, is how do we do that? So the only other thing I wanted to mention in the context is just so that you have an idea, a number in your head. About 72% of Mainers rely on fossil fuels for heating or cooling. That's a pretty high number. So we actually can, I think, this is a strategy that has great potential for us to improve. So that's the context, and I'll talk a little bit now about the focus of strategy, and then I'll focus in more on the weatherization. So there are 6 major topics for the strategy B. First one is improving building design and construction, and I'll touch briefly on that, but there's going to be more on that when we hear on Saturday, on the presentation on Saturday. So I'm not going to talk completely about that, but I will touch on it a little bit. The second focus is to move to net zero renewable ready new construction using Maine-made new construction materials. And again, we're going to hear about that on Saturday. The third one is to decrease energy needs. And that is what we were talking about really with heat pumps, is that they require less energy, and it's a different kind of energy, of course. So that's also part of the transition to low CO2 fuels. And then the fourth one is improving efficiency, comfort, safety, and cost savings in commercial buildings and affordable housing. And that's pretty much weatherization. And there are lots of different avenues to that, but that's really what that category is about. And then the final one is modernizing the electric grid. I won't talk anything about that at all. And I won't really be talking about transition to low carbon fuels. We've touched on that both in I think we touched a little bit on that with transportation, and touching also with the heat pump stuff. So I'm really going to focus my attention, my conversation mostly on the efficiency, comfort, and safety. And this is one strategy. They're all different strategies in this Maine climate plan, but this is one where there's an intersection between efficiency and health in a big way, because people who are cold, children who are cold, who go to school cold, who sleep cold, don't do as well. They don't think as well. And in this year of COVID, they certainly don't, because they're staying at home in their cold homes, and they're trying to learn when they're cold. People who are cold get sick more, they have more illness. So this is a real health issue as well. And improving the health of low income and poor populations who already have poor health is a really key element of improving health. So the plan, do you have any questions so far? I mean, I haven't said anything you have questions about, I'm sure, yet, except Bill. So, and his was a good question. Yes, Carol.
So while you were speaking, I was thinking about the state's commitment in the last couple of years to build more senior housing. And I seem to recall that a lot of these sorts of conditions were to be met in that kind of housing, that they would be more energy efficient, that they would be using a different code for building and so forth. Does anybody know anything about that?
Yeah, that's actually a requirement, of course, moving forward. But the the low-income property that was built over on Summer Street, I forget what it's called. It's got a name, you know, for the building, but it's right across from Scooters. That building is a green building. It's a very highly efficient green building. They've got solar power. They have a very tight, clean envelope, and all the bells and whistles of the upgrades to make the buildings more efficient and timers and things like that. And that was built, when was that finished? Probably 4 years ago. We haven't had any senior citizens housing built in our region in the last few years. That's for that is not specifically for older adults. It's just for low income people. But yes, and that is absolutely part of the plan, that any new construction will have to comply with some of the requirements. Yes, Bill.
Well, you know, it's interesting that Carol brought up codes, because here in Quebec, there are no codes. The only thing that's required on new construction here is inspection of the septic system. When we moved in 2001, we submitted a rough sketch of what we were going to do to the property, adding on to the existing house, but there was never any code inspector, no code requirements that I know of. As far as I know, that hasn't changed. From time to time, tax assessor will come by and look at the property and see if you know, the taxes should go up. But that I suspect that there are some other towns around Piscataquis County that are not following codes. Do you have any information on that?
Well, that's interesting that you mentioned that, Bill. No, I don't really, except that the implication from the minimum weight plan is that there are state codes, and I don't know how those apply in individual communities, but the expectation is that there will be that by 2035, all new buildings will be net zero. They will have to be net zero construction by 2035, and that will require not only workforce training, and workforce training is going to be training of contractors, training of electricians, training of code officers, architects, engineers, and that's written in the plan, that's the expectation, that code enforcement officers will be trained how to enforce the code. Now, I don't know. It's a very good question. It did not occur to me when I was reading the plan that there might be communities that don't have codes, or how that works. I would have to ask about that. I don't know. Does anybody else know anything about that? Yeah, Carol.
I can't say that I do, but I did read that, yeah, code enforcement and building codes are going to require a rethink, because it's not the way, you know, it was done in your grandpa's time. And that could take a while for people to adjust.
Well, they're yeah, I mean, they're talking about really having special classes that are required for contractors and for architects and for code enforcement officers and that sort of thing. So, and 2035 isn't that far away. So this is a very ambitious plan. The governor knows it. The implementation, I think, is going to be difficult. Really, this is going to be difficult. But so that's a good question, Bill, and I will see if I can find the answer to that. So let's move on. Oh, the other things I didn't mention, one of the other things, one of the other parts of the plan strategies is to, they have a lead by example, which they're expecting the government-run organizations, and that includes schools and police departments and town offices and that sort of thing, to lead the way in their communities to weatherization. And there is funding that actually there's federal funding coming down now. And also, and the state is going to leverage that federal funding to help communities. They already have been doing it. And so there are many of our surrounding communities have started already to install solar or to do weatherization or replace windows. So that is happening, and schools are beginning to do that as well. So leading by example is a key part of the program. And I think they will carry that over also into things like leading by example, having the government cars, for example, the DOT vehicles and stuff become electric. And so I think they're really going to try to do that quickly. The other thing I'm not going to talk about is accelerating the decarbonization of industrial processes. That falls into this part of the plan as well. And again, I'm not going to go into that. It just is beyond my knowledge. So let's talk a little about weatherization. I will say that I've been a WindowDressers purveyor now for about 5 years. And in the WindowDressers, and I'll talk more about that later, but in the WindowDressers project, one of the things that I have done is I go into people's homes and measure their windows for the window inserts. And one of the things that got me really interested in this climate plan, actually, and in the equity subcommittee, was that when I go into homes of people who are low-income customers, WindowDressers provides about 25% of the inserts for low-income customers at no cost. And so we're committed, and actually this year it's going to go up to 30%. So we're committed to providing no cost insulating window inserts for low-income customers. When I go into those homes, one of the things that I am struck by is that while they might benefit from some inserts in their windows, they have doors that don't close. They have no insulation in their floors or their ceilings, or they have holes in the floor, or they're even worse, they are mobile homes. And the mobile homes, if they're old, and many mobile homes are old, they are uninsulatable, and how they heat, and many of these people are heating their homes with kerosene. So what I have discovered is that you can't just do one thing. And so one of the things that the policy that the main climate plan talks about, which I think is really important, is that weatherization needs to be step one. So putting in a heat pump does not make sense if you're not going to weatherize the home as well. And this is a key part of the plan. And unfortunately, we're talking about a huge number of buildings that need weatherization. Penquist does it, of course, our CAP program and other CAP programs around the state receive money from Efficiency Maine and from Maine Housing to do weatherization, but they are not able, they don't have the employees, they don't have the workers. Even if they contract it out, there are not enough people to do all the weatherization that needs to be done, and they have a huge waiting list. So even now, this is a huge problem, even though they've been trying to do it for a long time. The goal for weatherization for the plan is a 20% decrease in heating load by 2050. And that means to upgrade energy efficiency and decrease energy use and emissions by 18% in privately owned homes and 23% in commercial buildings. And then they estimate that if they add smart technology onto the weatherization, they can actually additionally get another 11% decrease in energy use and emissions in homes and another 18% decrease in commercial buildings. So there's a great advantage to adding smart technology to the energy efficiency upgrades. The average cost now of efficiency main weatherization program for a home is about $6,800 per building. And it saves, weatherization of a building for that amount of money saves 2,192 pounds of CO2 per year, which if you look at that, it's $3.10 for every pound of carbon dioxide saved. So that's actually a very good investment, but it isn't cheap. But it's a very good investment. And that's something that we have to fund. So money has to come from somewhere. Federal government, of course, is supporting that as well as money from the state. In the plan, they talk about the benefits. And the benefits include workforce development and job creation, economic benefits such as decreasing cost of fuel to heat a home and fewer lost days of school or work, improved health of occupants and improved public health by decreasing CO2 emissions, increasing resiliency during power outages, because if a house is warmer and has a better envelope, it won't lose its heat as fast. And increased home values and equity for owners of the homes when they go to sell. So there are advantages, of course, to doing this. But obviously there are obstacles and there are things that we need to address. I won't go into the details of the equity, how the equity subcommittee has done its work, although I'm happy to if somebody is interested. But we worked with the Mitchell Center that designed a rubric with which we could evaluate all of the parts of the climate plan. And each segment of the climate plan, they took every strategy and they put every strategy into this rubric. And the rubric involved asking questions such as what's the impact, the economic impact on the end user or on the various affected parties in the particular strategy. So for example, if you want to say, put out more heat pumps, what is the economic effect for low-income people and vulnerable people of many different kinds of vulnerable populations, whether it's Native populations or LGBTQ, or they looked at all different vulnerabilities. What is the health outcome impact? Is there a health impact? What is the long-term, what do they call it? Wealth impact. So obviously, if you own your own home, there's a wealth impact to putting in a heat pump. If you are a low-income person who's a renter, you don't get that wealth impact unless you're saving money by not paying as much in your heating bill. There's some wealth impact in that, but if you're not paying the heating bill, you don't get that wealth impact. So it was a complex rubric, but it was applied to every single strategy, and it was very well defined. And there was a big report that came out of each of those strategies and how it applied to equity. Yes, Carol.
So this is a little bit maybe not straight in the line that you're talking about, but I'm wondering if there is some kind of rubric for people who own rental properties. I mean, is there some kind of a formula where they can factor in, how much they're paying for taxes, how much they're paying for water and sewer, how much they're paying for heat or whatever other things they're provided, and some kind of a cap on what they can charge, considering what they're paying out. And then if they installed, say, a heat pump, and they were saving a couple of $1,000s a year for the heat, you know, you would think that that would lower the rent because it's lowering their costs. So is there anything like
That
that?
was included, that kind of thinking was actually included in the equity evaluation. So they talked, and some of them strategies about how important it is not to pass on the cost to the renter, for example. So the flip side of what you were just saying is that if it's costing a landlord some money to put in heat pumps, we need to guarantee that they don't pass that cost on to the low income customers or jack up the rents because they now have heat pumps. And so that has been recognized as an equity risk area, and an area for attention from the equity subcommittee to make sure the implementation does not allow that to happen. So I don't know if that completely answers your question. I took it a little backwards, but there is certainly attention to the effect on the owner of the building, but also the renters, and to make sure that that equity is adjusted for. Because the reality is that for most of these parts of the plan, most of these strategies, for people who are people with adequate wealth, I mean, let's say switching to EVs, for example, it's a no-brainer, you know, for people you say, well, you know, I'm going to save so much money on gas. I mean, I have a plug-in hybrid. It doesn't have a long range. It only goes 25 miles on the electric battery, but I don't drive more than 25 miles most days. Sometimes I go to Guilford and back and it's fine. Or I can go to Dexter and back and it's fine. I can't get the Bangor and back, but I don't go there very often. But so for me, I only fill my gas tank about once every maybe 2 months, you know, in all the driving that I do. I don't use gas. And so for me, it was kind of an obvious thing to just move to the plug-in hybrid, or, you know, a plug-in vehicle. But that's not a calculation that can be done by somebody who's low income. So all of these movements that are being pushed tend to benefit people with incomes, adequate incomes, more than low-income customers, mostly. But weatherization does not necessarily do that. So the truth about weatherization is the weatherization has a great bang for the buck, because it really, if you're in the say you're a low-income customer and you're getting your fuel assistance from the LIHEAP, from the Heating Energy Assistance Program. If you're getting HEAP money for your fuel, it benefits everybody if you're weatherized, because then you don't need as much fuel. Or if you're getting it from the town, if the town is giving you your fuel, or the congregational church is donating, you know, $500 to fill your tank or whatever, it benefits everybody to be sure that your home is weatherized. So weatherization is really important, and that is something that we really can be doing more of and need to be doing more of. And there are lots of projects going on right now in our region. You know, some of you may know Andrew Bermudez and his work in Dexter with the Heart of Maine. He's developing a new program, center there called the Heart of Maine, which is a resource center. But he's been very involved in doing home weatherizations and repair projects. And the idea is to get people's homes insulated and to get people doors that close and windows that close, things like that. So So the actions that are, yes, Bill.
I didn't mean to interrupt, but as you're talking, I'm thinking, as you mentioned, that you go into some of these homes and they're so poorly constructed or in bad repair. Is there a point where you just can't weatherize, you can't really heat it, and it, then what are the options?
Well, I can tell you that I've gone into homes to measure for window inserts and have refused to measure because I told them, you know what? So currently the funding for weatherization and energy efficiency currently is paid for. A lot of it is paid for by electricity customers. So there's a little bit of a fee that you pay in your electric bill that is for weatherization and energy efficiency. And they're talking about, in the plan, creating an energy efficiency surcharge on fossil fuel heating systems or heat to increase the funding for the weatherization fund. Because currently those fuels do not contribute to the weatherization fund. WindowDressers is a community-based project. This is actually a slideshow from 2015, but it has great pictures on it. So WindowDressers is a community project that builds low-cost insulating interior window inserts that are basically pine frames that this bear is holding, and the pine frame is wrapped with polyolefin film, which you can see some of these in the background. And the frames are made to measure in your home, so it requires going and measuring each window individually. And you can see this stack with all different size windows, and they all have individual names and individual windows assigned to them. The polyolefin film is double pane, which means that the airspace in between is what is the insulating feature of the window. There's foam weather stripping around the outside so that it fits very snugly, and you really have to pull them out with we have a special tool we use called a paint can opener that actually pulls them out. What I was saying is that these are very affordable. For a moderate size, a medium sized window, it's about $45 per window. And I'll show you a sample of that. But the key thing is that it reduces heating bills by up to 25% if you put them in all your windows, and certainly reduces the CO2 emissions. The R factor, I was trying to find it today because I used to have the R factor on those, but I think it was something like 0.45 or something like that, for those of you who know anything about R factors. So it's a fairly good insulator. It also, I've had people tell me that it keeps their house cool in the summer. So it keeps the house warm in the winter and cool in the summer. And if you're on a noisy road, it cuts out the noise. Or if you're in a place where there's a lot of wind, and I don't know about you, but when I hear wind, especially in the winter, and it's just banging against the house, it really gets to you after a while. But the window inserts really keep it quiet. So there are some other really nice advantages to the window inserts. So the community build is a community effort. We ask every person who purchases window inserts to help us with the construction in one fashion or another. All recipients are asked to volunteer, and we do the build in all in 1 week. So we're going to be doing it the last time we did it was in 2019. We skipped 2020. But in 2021, we will be doing it the second week in October, and it'll be at the Dextertown Hall, which is where we did it in 2019. It's a nice spot and big space and easy to set up. The supplies and setup come from the WindowDressers main office, which was in Rockland, but they're moving. So they'll be out of Searsport this year. It's a 7-stage process. So the first part is to build the frames. And when this slide was made, we had the frames built and then we brought them up already constructed. But starting a couple of years ago, or 3 years ago, we started actually putting the frames together ourselves. So what happens is we do the measurements go into a computer program. The computer program figures out what size sticks of wood have to be cut in order to make the frame the correct size. And there are, of course, some calculations for the amount of foam and tape and all that stuff that is the wrapping. And then they bundle the cut sticks in a bundle of 4, and they label it for each window. And then when the bundle comes to us, we actually assemble the bundle into the window frame with a strut if needed. We add a strut if it's a bigger window, because you have to have a strut to keep it from torquing. So we actually do the build the frames, but the wood is cut in Rockland and assembled locally. And this is some of our local friends who were at this particular build, Patty Dow's and some of my friends. And you can see some of them are white. You can have them painted white if you want to. It's a little more expensive, or you can have a simple pine frame, but they're all simple pine, but we do have a painted option if you want the painted option. And you can see how clear they are. This is a completed window. The building process includes several different parts of the process. We have to put tape around the outside of the frame after it's built, double-sided sticky tape to attach the polyolefin film to. And then so you wrap one side, and this person is wrapping one side, and then you put more white tape on, sticky tape, and then you wrap the second side, and then you put some packing tape, clear packing tape over the edges to make sure that everything is held down firmly so it won't pull apart. And then you heat shrink it, and he's doing some heat shrinking. Meryl's one of our favorite builders. He's been working with us now for about 5 years. He lives up in Parkman. And so then you heat shrink, and then after you heat shrink, you put on, she's putting on the clear packing tape, and this fellow over here is putting on the last part, which is the foam gasket that goes around the outside. And that makes it a completed window. We also serve food, and some of our volunteers actually help by providing the food. This is a guy who got windows from us, and he actually provided a wonderful stew for us. So it's a team effort. We actually, this year, we happened to have somebody playing piano. We got rid of that. It was too noisy. It was too much cacophony in the build. But and I will just say that I have a little tiny window here, and you can see the foam on the outside. And this one would not normally need to have a strut because it's so tiny, but I take this with me when I go into somebody's home to measure. So what I do is I go in, and we have a laser measuring tool, and I take this in and I put it in their windows to make sure, among other things, that the windows are square and that the window sill is wide enough to hold the window, because you have to have a place for the window to fit into. It has to be a frame all the way around the window. Occasionally you'll have a home that's either an old home that's been renovated and it's missing one sill, or it's missing one edge of a sill. It's only got one edge or something like that. You have to have 4 edges to hold it in, and it has to be has square corners. I frequently will measure corner to corner, because it's in old homes, you sometimes have skewed windows that are not square, and that they will not fit. This will not fit if that's the case. So I take this with me and I put it in every window to make sure that it can fit behind the blinds or in front of the blinds or in front of the window, so that I can make sure that this is a good fit. So there's the white side and there's the, well, I see we're about at time. I want to thank you very much for joining me for this special climate series. And looking forward to getting together with you again during the coming year to talk more about climate-related issues. If you have any interest in ordering window inserts, please contact me and let me know. And you can call me or you can email me. My phone is 992-6822. And feel free to call me and order your window inserts. So anyway, thank you for joining me. It was great to see you all, and I'll see you again next time.